Coming up on Arirang News, with vote counting well underway, U.S. President Donald Trump is ahead in most of the swing states in the election, positioning him for a possible win over his Democratic challenger Joe Biden. South Korea watches the race closely because of its implications for defense policy, but also America's approach to China, South Korea's biggest trading partner. And South Korean investors won't have to worry about paying capital gains tax if they have less than $1 billion worth of shares. The government's canceled plans to apply the tax to smaller shareholders. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. President Trump is ahead in most of the swing states right now. He's won Florida, Texas, and Ohio, according to the experts. Trump addressed the American people about half an hour ago, saying that as far as he's concerned, he's already won. Joe Biden appeared earlier in the night, though, also sounding confident. We're still waiting, of course, on results from the key states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. Han Sung-woo has the latest.
4 more years of Donald Trump or a transfer of power to his Democratic challenger, Joe Biden? That is the question soon to be answered, depending on who claims 270 electoral votes out of the total 538. CNN had Biden in the lead with 220 electoral votes over Trump's 213, with vote counting still ongoing as of 3:40 p.m. Korea time. But according to CNN projections, Trump has already won many southern states, most notably Florida, a key battleground which accounts for 29 electoral votes. He's also leading the race in most rural central states and is expected to win the traditionally Republican Texas, worth 38 votes. Biden, on the other hand, has strong support from the Democratic strongholds of California in the west and New York in the east, accounting for 55 and 29 electoral votes each. CNN projects Biden to have won most of the Northeast, but not his home state, Pennsylvania. With an estimated 66% of votes in, the state currently favors Trump like many of the other swing states. The outcome of the election will come down to these key battlegrounds, and as of now, it is on a knife edge. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
The election has implications for South Korea in terms of the allies' sharing of defense costs, on which President Trump has taken a tough line. Also on North Korea issues, and especially when it comes to China, which is South Korea's biggest trade partner. Yoon Jung-min reports.
The South Korean government is keeping close tabs on the U.S. presidential election as there are a series of issues in need of a resolution between Seoul and Washington. These include the stalled defense cost-sharing negotiations, denuclearization talks with North Korea, and other issues between the allies amid the rising U.S.-China rivalry. The two countries also need to further work on the transfer of wartime operational control from Washington to Seoul. To check post-election strategies, Seoul's foreign ministry earlier formed a task force from related departments, including the North American Affairs Bureau and the North Korean Nuclear Affairs Bureau. Seoul's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa plans to visit Washington this month when the election is over, while Unification Minister Lee In-young signaled that he might also travel to the U.S. after the election. On Wednesday, Chinese President Xi Jinping is delivering a virtual keynote speech at the opening ceremony of the China International Import Expo. Eyes are on his possible messages towards the U.S. after the election, particularly at a time when tensions between Washington and Beijing have been heightening. Japan is also keeping close eyes on the election result. Japanese media say Tokyo is watching how the result will affect its bilateral defense cost-sharing agreement with the U.S., as well as the economy, particularly the impact on Japan's automobile sector. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
According to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the South Korean military have taken a North Korean man into custody after he was found south of the border in what may be a defection. The JCS said in a statement that he was captured at around 9:50 this morning on the East Coast after he was detected by surveillance equipment. South Korean authorities are investigating the man's identity and motive for crossing the border, including the possibility that he intended to defect. Once the man's presence was detected, the military raised its infiltration alert, but it says there has been no unusual movement by the North Korean military. South Korean investors won't have to worry about paying capital gains tax if they own less than $1 billion worth of shares, which is a little under $900,000. Finance Minister Hong Nam-ki has called off the proposal and offered to resign over the confusion he said it caused. That offer was immediately rejected by President Moon. Kim Jae-hee has the details.
Finance Minister Hong Nam-ki said on Tuesday the government accepts the ruling Democratic Party's demand to keep the threshold above which shareholders have to pay capital gains at its current level of 1 billion Korean won, or near $880,000 of shares in a single company. Hong cited heightened uncertainty in both the economy and recent global situation as the reason behind the U-turn. He also abruptly announced that he offered to resign to take full responsibility for the controversy caused by the capital gains tax plans.
I believe someone had to take responsibility for this issue that has sparked debates over the past 2 months.
But Hong's resignation offer was immediately rejected by President Moon Jae-in on Tuesday. It was also met with criticism by some politicians on Wednesday who said Hong is putting on a political show to protest against the ruling Democratic Party. But Hong insisted he had expressed a sincere intention to resign. The government had planned to lower the capital gains tax threshold for large shareholders to those who own more than 300 million won, or about $260,000 of a single stock, starting April next year. But the plan was met with objections from individual investors amid worries shareholders will rush to sell off their stocks. Meanwhile, the government also came to agreement on Tuesday to lower property tax rates for single property owners whose property is worth less than 600 million won, or some $530,000. The lowered property tax will range from 0.05% to 0.35%. The measure aims to protect people who own a single property from being adversely affected from upcoming changes in property tax valuations. The government will assess the value of real estate for taxation at 90% of their market value in the next 10 to 15 years. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon. And for that, I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Jun-seok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, thank you for coming on today.
Happy to be here.
Well, stocks on Wall Street were up about 2% on the eve of Election Day. It's not clear how we can interpret that, maybe except that investors apparently liked the way things were going. What's the story in the global markets and here in Korea?
Okay, well, global markets as a whole yesterday, it was a bit amazing. Almost every major stock market ended up going up, though by varying degrees. And the interpretation seems to be against every expectation that the analysts have tried to convince. I think the stock investors thought that this would be a fairly simple election, and probably with Biden winning the election. The reason I'm saying that is because for some stock markets, when now it seems like the election results will be delayed, and when President Trump seems to be gaining more votes, there seems to be at least some fall in the market. The Asian markets are closing or have just closed, and the Hang Seng Index has recorded a negative growth just toward the end of the day. And the European market, the FTSE, the trading has just started, and the trading is starting at a negative level so far. And the futures right now seems to be going down. So again, it seems like the markets have expected a fairly simple election against all advice to the contrary, and it does seem like they expected Biden to win the election, but now as the President Trump seems to be right now doing better than expected, and the results seem to be delayed, and it may take days for the results to come out. The market seems to be turning at least a bit negative so far.
Yeah, the futures suddenly turned down in the past couple of hours. Of course, the results of the election will have an impact on Korea's economy and the financial markets here. So would a disputed election or major protests. So what impact do you see in particular?
Okay, well, the biggest problem right now is uncertainty. I think the worst case scenario was that whether Biden wins or Trump wins, there will be uncertainty and long delay in getting the results, and then some contest on seeing who won. And right now, it seems to be falling in that scenario. Just about 10, 15 minutes ago, President Trump has said that he believes that he won the election, and apparently he even said that counting the votes should stop now. So right now the scenario seems to be unless Biden makes a big comeback in the next hour or so, the results will be contested, the votes will be closed, and there will be a lot of uncertainty, which means obviously bad news for the market. Now, in the longer term, if you look at the policies, if President Trump is elected, there will probably be some additional uncertainties because, well, President Trump has never been very good at making a consistent policy other than cutting taxes and increasing tariffs. And there will probably be more trade tensions with China and other countries, which will be reflected in the stock prices. Whereas if Biden wins the election, then I think the markets will favor more stability, more transparency that comes with the Biden presidency. So the prices will stabilize. But right now, the election seems to be going much more unstable and perhaps toward Trump than the markets have expected.
Well, something else we've seen in the past couple of days, oil prices jumping by 2% or more on both of the past couple of days. The price of gold up too. What do you make of these moves?
Okay, well, that actually makes more sense to me because every responsible analyst, political analyst and economist have said that this election will be close and it'll take a long time for the results to come out. And if we take that scenario, then the rise in oil prices as well as the rise in commodity prices and rise in gold prices as well actually makes fairly good sense because, well, the market, whenever markets are unstable, whenever the economic situation is unstable, these type of commodities and gold, their prices usually do go up. And there are a lot of things that we can expect which adds to the instability right now. Who wins the election? That's the biggest one. But will Trump accept the results if he loses? And will there be a lot of protests in the United States if one side or the other loses? We've seen on the news that the shops in New York City, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., they made provisions for violent protests. So that adds to the instability. And then the coronavirus infections in the United States and Europe is going up, and there has been terrorist incidents in Europe. So in a sense, the rise in commodity prices, the rise in price of gold, that I think is a more natural reaction. If the elections end up becoming more stable, I expect these prices to fall back to normal levels. But right now, the instability seems to be increasing. So at least for the next couple of days, unless the results of the election becomes more clear very quickly in the next few hours, I expect these prices to continue to rise.
All right, Professor, we'll have to leave it there for today and catch up soon once the election results become clearer.
Okay.
Thanks so much for coming on. Now, the South Korean government is going to hold an event later this month to help local startup companies find partners overseas. It's called COMEUP 2020, and there'll be a major focus on the kinds of technologies that'll be at the forefront of the post-pandemic era. Baeunji reports.
The Ministry of SMEs and Startups is to hold its annual conference later this month to discuss the latest trends as well as what's needed in the post-COVID-19 era. Under the slogan Meet the Future Post-Pandemic, the Startup Festival COMEUP 2020 will hold conferences to provide insights about startup companies. In the build-up to the event, foreign correspondents were on Tuesday invited to an online media briefing, which was live-streamed on Arirang TV's YouTube channel. Media outlets were given an overview of what to expect and encouraged to ask questions. The conferences will be focused on 12 different topics, including digital healthcare, the environment, and artificial intelligence. And speeches will be delivered from key speakers such as the CEOs of Market Curly and SM Entertainment. Online booths will enable potential investors to connect with startups through one-on-one consultation sessions. The event aims to help startup companies in Korea to reach overseas markets and to encourage foreign startups to network with domestic firms.
A total of 1,076 startups, including 646 startups from 88 countries worldwide, expressed their desire to participate as one of the 120 companies selected by COMEUP stars.
More than 21,000 participants attended last year's event, including 4,900 startups and 650 investors from across the world. This year's three-day event will run from November 19th to 21st and is to be held online due to the COVID-19 pandemic. 배은지, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live election coverage coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.